Hello and happy July. This is Margaret Murata, Superintendent of Haverhill Public Schools, joined here by Assistant Superintendent Mike Pifferling.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our summer update.
Today, we're sharing with you some information that we are shortly going to be discussing at school committee and submitting to the Department of Education. They have asked that we submit to them by July 31st 3 plans for the opening of school 2020. One plan is a full remote plan where all students under the plan would be learning from home. The second plan is a hybrid plan where students would have a combination of learning opportunities both at home, remotely, and in person in school, as well as the more traditional in-person schooling with social distancing and PPE. DESE has asked that we create all 3 plans and that we submit those plans to them for review. Then they will send them back to us with any corrections, additions, deletions for school committee to vote on, with the hope of by August 10th, us having a path to the school opening with a selected model, at least for the beginning of school. Anything to add to that, Mike?
And I think that's critical that you say that this is an ongoing process, and at any time things may change. So that we have 3 plans, so that if something changes along the way, we have the guidance already within the district to make modifications as we need to quickly and effectively.
Yeah, and we've been working on these plans and different scenarios for the return to school essentially since we left school in the spring. And we've had hundreds of people giving input. We've had parent surveys with thousands of parents. Our last parent survey had almost 3,500 parents responded to. We've had teacher surveys with hundreds of teachers responding to them. We've had input in person and remotely from a wide variety of people. We've talked to surrounding communities. We've listened to the Department of Education. We've followed their guidance. We've reviewed plans from other communities, from other states, and from other countries. And I think that there's one thing is very clear to me, and that's that there is no perfect option. That we are, we're in the midst of a pandemic. We're in a very difficult place. We have 3 options to work on, and none of them are perfect, and no one is going to work for any child or any family or any community. We can't make everyone happy, but we're going to do the very best we can to provide the best education that we can to every child in Haverhill, and that's really where our focus has been. Is on making sure that the kids are both safe and educated, because I think that's our mission as a public school system.
And I think a lot of the guidance that we've gotten is from our stakeholders, whether it be our faculty or our parents or our community members. Also, we learned a lot from the March, April, May, June time period of what went exceptionally well, what could have been improved upon. And it's been great that we've had, our families tell us what they need to make this a better program, and also our staff what we need to do for our staff in order for them to be successful with our students. So I think it's been good that we've been able to take a little bit of time and digest a lot of the information that we've received and put it into our plan moving forward.
Absolutely, Mike. And as you know, the sort of head operations person here in the district, I know you've been very, very busy, just coordinating efforts, assuring that things are in good operational order to begin the school. I know we've checked every window in the school district, worked on all the sinks, working on changing bubblers over to water bottle fillers, and all manner of things around safety.
Yeah, I mean, we have a really good team, dedicated team of facilities and maintenance and custodians and stakeholders who have, really taken charge of making sure that our facilities, when we open them back up in September, will be at their optimal, as optimal as we can make them, environment for our staff and our students to return to.
Great. Yes, and I thank you for all your work and for all the work of the teams. So I think what we have is we have a series of options, more to less restrictive options for the return to school. And within each of those options, we have a series of sort of pros and cons, benefits and implications of each of the models. And we're going to be sharing those with school committee Thursday night and submitting that all to DESE on Friday. And we'd like to give you an overview of each one of the models right now and sort of the pros and cons in those models. We haven't officially chosen anything yet. There are no decisions made, but we'd like to be completely sort of transparent and honest with people about the imperfections of each of the possibilities before us. As we review the three options that DESE has asked us to present to them for the plans for the school year, the first of the plans is an full in-person learning model. Obviously, that would look differently than it has in the past. We will have social distancing requirements in place. The requirement from the Department of Education for social distancing for children is a minimum of 3 feet. We believe in our buildings that we can increase the social distancing to about 4 feet on the average across the school district between children and obviously no less than 3 feet. However, I think as the community knows, our buildings are at capacity across the school district, so much more than 3 feet or even moving towards the CDC recommendations of 6 feet are difficult for us at the full in-person model. I think to describe what the model would look like in Haverhill when we think of full in-person, our teams that have been working on these models have been thinking about how to make this work given the amount of change that would be needed with the beginning of our school year. So we are at this point in our plan proposing that full in-person means Wednesdays being a remote school day. Students would come to school Monday and Tuesday. There would be a remote day on Wednesday, and then all the students would return to school again for Thursday and Friday. And we're proposing this in order that we could deep clean our buildings on Wednesday, excuse me, and also to allow our students a chance to dig deep into remote learning and our teachers when we are still able to give them hands-on assistance with that the following day. So if a student had difficulty with one of the learning platforms, or perhaps a teacher had some difficulty, we would know that up front. We wouldn't wait till we were on full remote learning, which is certainly a possibility if there's another spike. And we'll be able to work those sort of kinks through now rather than waiting till later when people might need to try to do it over the phone or, be stuck at home without the resources needed. We thought Wednesday was also important. Gives our teachers time for PD. There's going to be a lot of new protocols the teachers have to learn around PPE safety requirements, online learning tools, and a whole variety of things that we need our staff to be up to speed on. The Department of Education has told us that at the beginning of the school year, we will have 10 professional development days to get those started, so that training started. So families will be hearing at school committee tomorrow night that we're going to need to revise the calendar back about 10 school days in order to support that professional development, the structures, routines, and the understanding of the various PPE and sanitation guidelines within our schools. Mike, what else should I be sharing?
Yeah, I think that we've talked about the classroom environment and there are other environments that we need to be considering also when we're looking at a full return to school model. We've also looked at what breakfast and lunch will look like. Certainly at a full return to school model, we do not have the capacity in our cafeterias to feed every child in that environment. So we need to look at other environments. Do we open up our gymnasiums as now maybe a breakfast center also, or is it more breakfast in the classroom? do we do a mixed model? What does lunch look like on the same environment? So those are things that we need to consider when we're looking at a full return to school on-site model. A couple other things that we've looked at and things you'll be hearing more about. We're looking at our vehicle traffic for drop off in the morning and pick up in the afternoon, whether it be for walkers or parent-driven students, self-driven students at the high school level, but also our bus traffic and what our bus capacities look like. So we know right now that we can get somewhere between 25 and 27 students on a bus. So what does that look like? How do we make that work for all of our families and make sure that we can transport every student who needs transportation to school? So those are a couple of things that we're looking at outside of the classroom, although there's many other things that we're looking at, but those are just two of the things that cause us to sit back and say, how can we make this, this model work? And we know we can make it work. It just may not be something that it's not going to be what we saw in February and March when we left school.
Right. So agreed. And I think we also know that there are families that just don't feel comfortable returning their students to school at this point. Some of those families, the students have medical issues. Some of those families, parents or family members have medical issues, and in some cases, families just aren't comfortable given the situation in the country and the world right now. And I think it's important for those families to hear that we hear them, that we are, as we move into this description of our models, we will be proposing a remote learning academy that would support both kids with medical issues and kids and families that just didn't feel comfortable returning to in-person learning right now. So I want to put that out there that, even a full in-person model for us has room for parents to opt into a remote learning opportunity. And teachers as well, I should say. I mentioned there'll be teachers watching who will be in similar situations. And we've begun having conversations with teachers about who is and isn't in a position to return to work right now, given the sort of constrictions of the CARES Act and the supports that are available for employees through that act. I think the busing conversation is a real one. Anybody who's been on the buses, who's waited at the buses stops, knows that 27 students is not what is typically on our school buses. I believe they're more towards 60 or maybe more. So that's a significant cut in the number of students we could put on a bus. And so that would mean certainly changes to our transportation, be it changing the hours of the school day to allow for waves of students to come and go, to certainly support parents driving and students walking in any way we can, working with safe routes to school around that, as well as looking at our policies around transportation. And do they need to fall more towards the state regulations around walking, which are much more restrictive and would put far fewer students on the bus than our policies here in Haverhill, which I know would be very unpopular here. So I guess I would say in closing that we want all our students back, that's our goal along the way. But it's also very clear to us that we have to make sure that our schools are healthy and that our students and teachers have what they need to be safe when they come to school. So that is of the utmost concern. And if folks read the draft document that we're sending to DESE, there are certainly some hurdles for us to climb in getting all of our students back to school together. And the second of the two models that DESE has asked us to flesh out for them of what that would look like in Haverhill is a hybrid learning model. And for DESE, hybrid means part in person and part remote learning. And there are a variety of ways that that can be accomplished. Some of the ways that I've heard folks looking at are AM, PM sessions, week on, week off sessions, um, Monday, Tuesday / Thursday, Friday cohorts. And we've looked at all these things and researched all of these things and had conversations with our surrounding communities to find out what they're considering. And with that, we landed on a 2-day on, Wednesdays as remote, a second cohort, 2 days on model. So that would mean students in cohort A would go in person on Monday and Tuesday, and then they would go remote Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And students in cohort B would go remote Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they would go in person Thursday, Friday. And again, this is, start the year and to sort of think about how we can move towards a more in-person model, provided that our numbers stay low. But we're really shooting to be successful from the beginning and to grow on that success and to try not to take on too much to begin with. So Mike, what do you have to add to that conversation?
I think this model it's kind of the middle of the road model. It's not full on remote learning, and it's not full on in class learning. It adds some benefits on both sides, and certainly it has some detractions also. Certainly from a transportation standpoint, that will help us, as well as from food service. It'll help us in both of those areas that we mentioned in the full on learning plan that we had talked about just before this section. But certainly, there's some things that are going to help us, but there's also, we have to understand our faculty as well as our families out there. 2 days on, 3 days off for our families. How does that affect our families? So that's something that we've thought hard and long about. And also our staff who might not live in the Haverhill community, they might be in a neighboring community. And what are their children's school districts doing, and how does this affect them? So these are, again, not simple decisions, and a lot of thought went into this, and a lot of collaboration with our also our surrounding districts on models that they were looking at, so that maybe we could sync up some of them. But everybody's looking at this a little bit differently in how they're going to do things. So again, it's not going to work. Not everybody's going to be 100% happy with any of these three plans, but this one particularly allows us to pick up a couple of places that we're lacking, but also puts a couple more burdens on our families and our staff members from a full-on return plan. So.
Yeah, when I talked to the other local superintendents as well as folks around the state, this does seem to be the most popular plan. And in the Merrimack Valley, it seems that most people are moving towards the 2 days on cohort rather than the week on, week off cohort model, which influenced us a little bit because our teachers don't all live in Haverhill. So, given that they live in some surrounding communities, mirroring those schedules is helpful to our staff, and we need our staff to be in the building. So that was part of the decision. I think one of the real benefits of the hybrid model is that it allows us to have 6 feet social distancing from the beginning. I think we all know that it's going to be difficult to return to school for our kids. Masking requirements, PPE, hand sanitizing. I think it's going to be important that we all have just a little bit of space to get used to that in. And I wouldn't want to see the kids at least start too close to each other. Again, in this model, we would have that remote learning academy for people who need it or want to opt into it. Which is important for those folks, but it also allows us to get the numbers down in the schools just a little bit further. We're looking, I don't know if you mentioned it before, at possibly about 20% of our families, it looks like will be opting into that. So that takes a class down that might have been 25 students down to 5 students in the remote category. And then you've got 20 students in the classroom in 2 cohorts. So you'd have 10 students in the classroom live at any given time.
And I think it's also important to mention that we're working with some of our community partners on what we
Absolutely.
can do on these days when students are in a remote environment, and more importantly for families who need childcare during that time. That we're working with our partners to find solutions for those families.
Yeah, both the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club have been specifically interested in helping and reaching out, and we've been in conversations with them. And I know there are other community agencies as well. Our Discovery Club internally will be looking to help. I think, while in many ways this feels like a good model for us schools, we're acutely aware that for some families it's a very difficult model. In some ways, it's the most difficult model.
And I think the other thing that we've been looking at is identifying families who, just to take two schools, we may have a seventh grader at Nettle and a third grader at Golden Hill from the same family. How do we make sure that they're in the same cohort? Because that seventh grader may be the person who provides a little bit of care for the family during the day, or maybe it's a high school student. But we need to look at families and grouping families in the same cohort if that's what they want to have happen, so that older children can assist with some of the childcare responsibilities if that's what the family chooses. So we've taken a lot of these things into consideration to make sure that we're doing as much as possible to assist our families and our staff in this type of a model.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I think the other wrinkle in this really, and when we look at remote learning as well, is lunches and breakfast for students. We would clearly need to have a way to both serve our students who are in school and to provide that food to the many students that would be remote learning, that would need breakfast and lunch as well. So we're working on that. We've got teams of people poking holes in all the plans and trying to look at where the problems will be. And so I don't know if anybody can think of problems that we haven't thought of yet. I'll be interested to hear of them, because we've come up with a lot.
Yeah, and I think every time we think we've got something on the right path and a great plan in place or a great thought in place, somebody is there to poke a hole in it. And we're thankful to have that, because that's the only way we're going to get this as perfect as possible. Nothing's going to be perfect, but as perfect as possible is critical.
Yeah, yeah. So that is sort of the overview of the hybrid learning model. There's more um, that will be posted in our draft that's going to DESE, and certainly over the next couple of weeks, we will be providing more and more detail on that. So thank you all. And in just a moment, we will return to talk about our remote learning plans. And finally, we'd like to share with you our thoughts about a remote learning model for Haverhill Public Schools, looking at both a remote learning academy, as we've mentioned before, that students could opt into or join because of medical reasons, as well as a remote learning opportunity should we need it as a school system, should we feel unable to open either in September or at some time during the school year, need to pivot. So I think a remote learning academy is, it's full remote learning. Um, we would like, if the schools are open and we have those Wednesdays available, when the buildings will be less filled, to potentially allow students from the remote learning academy to work more in person in small groups or with teachers or other students in our schools in a much more controlled environment. So we are looking at that as a use for our Wednesdays. The benefits of remote learning are certainly they are much safer from COVID, although there are questions around how safe they are for students' social emotional well-being and sort of that lack of contact with others. I think if we return to remote learning, or when we return to remote learning this year, it's going to look a little bit different than our remote learning last year. We jumped into remote learning sort of in emergency crisis mode last spring. And remote learning this fall if we entered it, would be much more sort of thoughtful and planful. We currently have a posting for a director of remote learning, who would coordinate all the remote learning, and sort of spearhead the efforts. I think that's very important. We've had teachers working across the summer, sort of 20 teachers that are remote learning superstars that have been working with students, all students across the city that are interested in remote lessons. And those teachers are really solid at remote learning, and will act as peer leaders moving forward, to bring us to the next place in remote learning. We know we can do it better, and we're going to keep improving it. Remote learning will look different this fall in that it will be graded. Desi's been clear that any remote learning would need to be graded. It would need to be full day rather than half day, and it would have a much more structured feel than typical remote learning that occurred last fall. But what else would you like to share about remote learning, Mike?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be very difficult to replace an in-person learning model. So this is probably this is going to be primarily for in a crisis that we need to pivot, as you said, to a remote learning model because of some type of a spike, but also to give some students did actually thrive in a remote learning environment in the springtime. They certain types of students just pick up better on this type of model. But it is going to be different, and it's going to be much more structured. So I do like that we pointed that out and we stressed that I know some families felt like their kids did really great in remote learning in the fall and the springtime, and other families felt that maybe their kids might have benefited from being in class. So if we do need to pivot, we are making the changes that we need to ensure that the remote learning in the fall, or when we need to pivot, is going to look different from the spring remote learning that we were forced into.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some more detail in again in the draft that I encourage people to look at. There are some special circumstances around high needs students and them, potentially attending school full time in a safe and socially distanced way. I think in every instance, our goal is to get the kids back as soon as it's safe and as soon as we can do it effectively. And so that's always what we're going to be sort of pushing for and working towards. But we don't want to start out and bite off more than we can chew. So we want to be aware of that.
While we talk about cafeteria or meal service and the other two plans, certainly with the remote learning academy or remote learning pivot that we may need to make at some point, we would continue as we have been all since March 16th or something, right through the summer and into the fall. We would offer remote options for students to pick up meals, breakfast and lunch on a daily basis. So that would continue if we were to pivot or for students who were in that model.
Absolutely. And I guess I would just say, so this is just sort of a skeleton outline of the three models that the Department of Education has asked us to look at. We will be getting feedback from them on these models. We will be having further conversations with school committee about these models, and drafting some further plans again. Around August 10th, they should be out for families to plan from. So nothing is written in stone. As sort of the disease state may change, our plans will change. This is completely flexible, given the health of our students and our teachers. But we do need to plan, and we do need to think about what we're doing, and we need to share with the community our thoughts at this point, so that they can begin to make their plans. So we thank everyone. This community has been wonderful and very supportive of our efforts, and very understanding of the position that we're in. We're sharing this with people at this point, not because it's written in stone, but because we want to start sharing where we may be going in the fall. sure that there will be more surveys, more conversations, more community conversations um, about this. But our two priorities will continue to be safety number one and educating our children number two.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that we've been making decisions from multiple different standpoints, but some of those decisions have been made from the data that we've received through our surveys and from our community members, and the other one, obviously, we've been making a lot of decisions based on DESE requirements and what they'll allow us to do, but also from a logistical standpoint, what makes sense, what makes sense for the students, what makes sense for our families, our staff. So we're looking at multiple areas when we make our decisions or make our recommendations on which way we're going to go with these. So we do value your input and your feedback. So anything that you with the next survey, please take the time to either respond to it or speak to the people who might reach out to you for some data on your children and what you're going to need to come back to a different environment in September.
Great. Great. Well, I thank everyone for their time. Certainly much appreciated. Encourage you to, read the draft and look for future drafts and more information coming in the coming weeks.